Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we are on episode 315, and we thought we'd chat a little bit about axes. And we did talk about this like way back when we first started the podcast, but that was many moons ago. So it's a prime time to revisit it and maybe touch up a little bit because last time it was pretty old school flow for us, I think, is the
Yep.
words I'm looking for. So, this time I thought we'd have a little chat about it. Different types, how to select one, maybe some maintenance, things to look for, things potentially to avoid, and just some general discussions. So, I put the post out there. Hopefully, we get some folks that join us here live, and they can share their 2 cents too, because I think this is one of those things that it's kind of a personal subject. Everybody's going to have a difference of opinion on this because everybody's going to have a different feel for the axe they like, much like a knife, I think is what this is going to turn out to be. What's your thoughts, Ben?
Sure. I mean, I have seen axes take quite a beating over the years where people, have bashed them as unsafe, not necessary. You can do more with a little knife, blah, blah, blah. But I still enjoy my axe. I really do generally take an axe with me. There's something about having a little bit of heft, the ability to swing that and do things pretty quickly. I think small trees I can cut down quicker with an axe than I could with a saw. I don't find it tires me as much oftentimes as a saw. There's an argument for them. Is there a time a saw is a better tool? Yeah. You can also carve with an axe. So there's a lot of things that comes in handy. Driving my tent pegs is somewhere I use it a lot. So size, shape, cost. These are all things we can definitely talk about. And I think is the big thing that you really get into. Like most people who like knives or axes tend to have certain axes they really go to, and they oftentimes I find look down on other axes.
I don't carry a full-size axe, but I do carry a tomahawk that I enjoy, and that's about the only thing I don't have here for an example. So I did grab some examples this time, because I did have questions on them from the last episode from many, many months ago now, and I just kind of found them back in my emails, and that's kind of what drug this back up. So that's Eric joining us there. And I guess that's where I'd like to start, Ben, is a couple of different types to actually... And don't get me wrong, not like the axe guru here, but I am going to cover some basic types of axes because not all axes are created equal, and hopefully we can give you a quick rundown of what each axe does do well. And I do have like a bunch of them sitting over here, Ben, so I'm just going to grab one, talk about it, and you pitch in whatever you want to add in onto it as well, because you'll recognize most of these. And I think the first place to start, and I hope most people are going to understand this, is there is a difference between an axe and a hatchet. They're you know what I mean? Like, technically a hatchet is a small axe, is basically what it comes down to. But generally a hatchet, and here's like just a common style that you can get at your big box mart. They're small, one-handed. They're good for like splitting small kindling, maybe a little better than batoning. Great for limbing stuff up. I love them for doing like basic shelter prep. If you were going to do something like a debris shelter or something like that, and you just want to clear all the little limbs. As Ben was saying before, if you're using a saw to cut all those off, you're going to drive yourself nuts when sometimes you can just take this and you can snap a bunch of them off really quick. The beauty of a hatchet is you can choke up on it quite high. Mind you can do this with an axe too. And it gives you a significant amount of control because the head, the steel part at the top, is usually not as heavy and as daunting as a full-size axe. And I know you have one of these too, Ben. That's why I grabbed this one. This is kind of the one that Ben and I often talk about, and this is a Fisker hatchet. And I love this thing, you know what I mean? Like, this often comes in my truck, and when it's winter, I generally leave it beside the stove, because it's just a really good axe. Plastic hollow handle is the only thing I didn't think I would like originally, but I've never had a moment's trouble with it. What about you, Ben?
I haven't had trouble, and I found it a Bic lighter slides in that perfectly.
I have a Bic lighter. I am going to try this. How do you plug the end up? Just run a cable through it?
You can't. So if you take a piece of paracord, tie a knot on it, and drop it in, and then push your bick in behind it. When you pull the paracord out, the bick will come with it, but it generally will hold it pretty good.
Fair
Test it.
enough.
You just did it fit in?
It's in the bedroom. I'll have to go grab it in a bit.
But yeah, your standard bic lighter, at least doesn't mind, fits in perfectly well. You can wedge a few band-aids in there if you want. You can get some fishing supply in there. You can make a pretty good survival kit right into that little handle. And I've seen a few guys do it, and they just plug the end then with a rag or something just to keep it clean and dry, or just put a piece of tape over it. There's a few ways to keep it in, but generally it's wedged in, and then just have that piece of string that you can yank and pull all that stuff out. But yeah, it does act as a second thing. I think Gerber has the same axe. Fiskars and Gerber, I think, are related. They actually have a saw that fits inside of one of the handles too.
Fish 85 just mentioned that. I have the Gerber axe with the saw in the handle, and it's been pretty handy.
It is. I mean, it's a good shape. The hook at the end I find is really comfortable. It prevents the axe from slipping out. It's lightweight with enough heft that you can cut something. You can touch up the edge. If you were to somehow destroy the handle, I think they have a very good warranty. But it might be hard to fix in the woods. Maybe you could jam a stick in there and get you out of the woods. But yeah, that's about the biggest complaint anyone's ever had. But I've seen very few records of anyone truly damaging the handle. I think you'd have to do something pretty
probably above and beyond what it was meant to do originally. Yeah. Which, once again, right, folks, keep in mind, that's what these are. Like, axes are tools, but they have limits.
Yeah. So if you're driving trucks over the handle, or if you're, overshooting and hitting a lot of wood against that shaft, eventually, yeah, you'll definitely damage it and break it. But shy of abuse, I don't think you're going to break one. So, yeah, that size hatchet, I think, is perfect to get mounted in a small pack, taken on a day trip, if with the right sheath or face, whatever you want to call it, when you put on, you can hook it to a belt. It is probably your ideal everyday carry type item. When you get into the slightly longer ones, which I'm sure you have a few there, you're going to see that it becomes a bit more awkward of a thing to carry. It doesn't fit as many places. You have to be a bit more choosy in your pack or your carrying method. The downside to that axe, if there's anything, is the shortness of it. Means you have to be a lot careful in how you swing it. There is exactly enough room to sort of like swing it and hit yourself in the shin or the knee if there's nothing between you and that item. But no, other than that, very useful tool. Like I said, you can carve with it. You can use it to the back end of pawl to drive tent pegs, nails, whatever you need in. And that comes in handy way more than you think. I think half the reason I like to take an axe is it's essentially a hammer when I need a hammer. You know what I mean?
No, it's very true. So just a couple comments from the question, or a couple questions from the comments. Oh, it's going to be one of those nights. And I answered this here, but I guess I'll answer for everybody. So Fish is saying, nope, it was Eric. Does it have a cover for the blade? Yeah, the Fisker does come with like a plastic walking type style that covers the face of it. I would suggest, if you have the ability and a little extra cash, go get a good leather one made. The plastic one is great. Don't misunderstand, but it's very rigid. It's got kind of the little handle on top. What I like it for is I'm going to mount it on the ATV, and it actually sits in it and then clips down, and then with a bungee cord, this thing's super secure. So if you were hard mounting it, perfect axe sheath, whatever you want to call for it. But if you want to carry it on your hip or in your bag or something like that, I mean, I would prefer a nice leather case or a ballistic case or something like that. Something a little bit more malleable. It's not going to quite take up the bulk and the rigidness of the one that comes with it. And I should have grabbed the one that comes with it, but it's out by the stove. What else do we got here? I keep camp axe in my work truck. That is a silky saw covers that, and a silky saw covers a lot of needs. And that's basically been set up there. And who in Nova Scotia makes a good leather axe sheath? You know what? I can recommend a couple guys. Jamie Harris. He does quite a few, or a lot of leather work. He's kind of a steel worker, but he also does leather work. He done one of my knife sheaths here, and I've showed it off before.
Al Holiday.
Al Holiday's another one. Peter, I guess he's New Brunswick, isn't he? Peter Fisher or whatever his name is.
Oh, maybe.
Anyway, there's a couple. If you just look up those two we mentioned, they're both here in Nova Scotia. And the other person that's joining us here is Red Sand Adventures. That's Danny. And I was hoping he would come on because I wanted to say Danny recently celebrated a birthday. And I kind of snuck into my personal account wishing him happy birthday because I was waiting for this next episode, hoping he'd come on so that Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures can officially wish Danny, Red Sand Adventures, a happy birthday. And hopefully everybody over here in the comments will wish him a happy birthday too. And be sure to check out his YouTube channel. That's Red Sand Adventures. He does a lot of stuff over there on the island. He does a nice Tacoma build. There's some really interesting videos there, so be sure to check him out. Okay.
Happy birthday. Let me get it out there.
So that's kind of a hatchet, and to hold those two up side by side, like that's just kind of like Walmart Canadian Tire Special. That's the Fisker. The Fisker is a little smaller. It's also significantly lighter, but I find it has way more control and nicer steel. So that's just some comparisons there. Moving up from that one, we have what's called a lineman's axe, and this is generally what I take with me. I accidentally forgot this one at a camp, and somebody used it to split wood, and the number one thing that you should never do with an axe is once it goes into a piece of wood, try to twist the handle sideways to split it, because that's what they did, and I don't know if you folks can see it there, aside from beating the throat out of it, they put a big split down the handle, so now I either have to find another handle. I had a guy out in Eureka that works with Ash make this handle, or I'm going to have to make a new handle because he no longer does it. And he used to do amazing work. And this handle was really old, and I'm super bummed about it. It's kind of been sitting on the back project burner because I know I got to do it, but every time I see it, I'm just slightly disgusted about it.
Is there a farmer's co-op near you?
No, most of them closed down around here. Now, a lineman's axe versus a hatchet. So there's your length of a hatchet. Lineman's axe adds about another 8 to 10 inches onto it. Lineman's axe still fairly narrow at the back, fairly long face on it. The reason I like this one is because I can still get enough control, at least with this handle I could. We'll see what happens when I change it out. But I can still choke up on this, and I can do carving with this. I can get a nice point on the... Oh, God, there's a chip in it, too. Anyway, I can get a nice... I can do a lot of fine work with this, is what I'm going to try and say. And I'm going to stop looking at it, because every time I do, I see something new. I can get a lot of fine work out of this, but I also get a little bit of extra length, so I can get a little bit of leverage. But not so much that it's adding a whole bunch of bulk. This lineman's axe actually weighs less than this hatchet. So that's one of the reasons I liked ash or hickory for a handle. They don't weigh a lot, but they last really well.
One of my favorite axes I ever had, and I still have it somewhere, I took the head off one of those fiberglass axes because it is a smaller head, and I put it on a slightly longer handle. So it had, like, originally it had, what, I don't know, that's a 13-inch handle, and I put it on like an 8-inch handle, an 18-inch handle. And that extra few inches made a world of difference, and I found it really good for cutting small brush, alders, things like that. It was pretty well like the ideal size for me. For so much stuff, and it oftentimes got strapped into my canoe or my kayak, and I took it around a lot of places. You're gonna obsess with that thing.
Oh, it looks like somebody tried to sharpen it. Anyway, never leave your tools, folks. Rule number 1: never leave your tools.
A good point. If you value your axe, be very careful of who you let touch it.
Yeah, an axe is a personal thing, and that's like somebody wearing my underwear. What they did to that's just gross on many levels.
But how often? I mean, it happens. How often does somebody using an axe swing it, hit a rock, and chip it? And how often do they, like you said, like pull it out of the surface incorrectly, so they get stuck in a stump or in a log, and they put stress on your handle, because your handle's meant to take force in a single axis.
Downward and upward motion. That's thus the shape. It's built to have leverage like this, but if you're twisting it and torquing it like this, which they did, that's not meant to take that.
No. But yeah. So, and then,
oh,
of course, there's a lot of axe style heads. I don't think we're going to have time reasonably to go over them all.
Something like that, maybe?
Well, show it up. I can't see.
Oh, where
that double
you
bit
at?
it?
There you are. It's a double bit
I
axe
have
is
one
what
of
this
those.
is.
And it's really hard to find a decent handle for it.
Same guy made this one. I used to use this when I worked for Natural Resources for running lines. Double bit axe, also called a... well, you know what? I've heard people call these lineman axes simply because they used to use them for running like property lines. You know what I mean? Blazing trails. And the reason there was a double bit, for what it was worth, and doing that stuff, or what was always told to me, so if it's a lie to me, it's a lie to you, you always kept one nice and razor sharp and one a little bit more blunt. You keep your razor sharp one for doing your cutting, your blunt one for doing work like in and around roots and stuff like that. You know it's going to get beat up anyway. So you always had a nice, good, sharp one to go. And then you had your sacrificial one that way you could always keep a nice sharp bit. And that's what we always did when we ran lines. We had one good sharp one that you could take and you could blaze that. And then if we had to flip a stump or dig a post, we had the end that we'd always beat to hell. And you can really tell which one is which on this. All right. But yeah, so a double bit axe like that. And it's the one that has the two blades on either side. Nice axe for doing what I just said. Not necessarily a great axe for bushcrafting in all instances, because it is a thinner head on it. And I'm sorry for everybody that hears that. My daughter has her tablet plugged in. It's got a broken cord. So every time I breathe on it funny, it disconnects and reconnects. But any case, for those of you that can see that, you can tell that's a very fine profile and width on that blade. It does not take glancing very well, and you have to be pretty careful with them. Plus, you don't have that flat back on the back of it. They don't really split well because they're so narrow, so they're basically for blazing and cutting branches and things like that. If you try to split with it, it's just going to sink into the wood. It has no real wedge shape to it.
No. So you need wood that readily splits. And some wood does. Some wood tends to just, you don't have to barely hit it and it'll split. And then other wood will absorb almost anything you can throw at it. I've had some issues. But I was also thinking, like, the axe with more of a beard, right? Like, some of them have that. So that head style really gives you a bit more hand control when you want to, like, shave down an end or plane wood. Like, you can do, and there's axes that are designed for planing or hewing axes. And those are really good. If you're really into bushcraft, you want to build a log cabin, you want a proper hewing axe. I'm pretty sure that's the right term. And what you have is basically, it's completely flat on one side and almost parallel to the surface you're planning on cutting it. And all your wedges on the other side. So when you cut, you can cut a fairly flat line and you can plane the side of a log. So if you want two logs to face against each other, that is the tool for that. And that's how you could make some rough lumber in the woods with very, minimal other tools. And it's effective. Otherwise, they would have used big saws for that, but that took a long time. And a man or a woman, a person who's familiar with the good use of an axe can process an awful lot of wood really quick, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, just looking at some of the comments down here. So Andrew, I've never heard the term lineman's axe. Is it similar to a boy's axe? Now, see, I've never heard the term boy's axe. Lineman axe. No. What's that?
Boy's axe is a very common one.
Is it?
It's the 3/4 inch or three-quarter style handles, slightly shorter than a full axe, but longer than the hatchet, and that's what we always called them, as boy axe.
Okay, then that's probably exactly where this would fit into. We always called them linemen's axes because it was always linemen that used them. So if you were running machines in, you use this to basically limb and tie ribbons. So you wanted something that was a little longer than a hatchet in case you got something that was bigger, but you wanted something that was small and light enough you could still get in and do some finesse work. And that, like I said, we always called them linemen's axes. So yeah, boy axe, guess exact same thing. There you go. I learned something today too. And then finesse if you need to give a good beard trim. So when we're saying a little extra beard in it, when you look at an axe head like this, if this bottom edge trails down a little, that's the beard of the axe. So you'll get some of them that kind of run down a little longer, and you can actually they come down over your fingers, and that gives you quite a bit of control over it.
A lot of times the axe that you might referred to as like a Viking axe. They had more of a beard. It allowed you to get your hand behind the blade. So, but I know it's a depending on the type of use you're putting it through, it's somewhat limited use.
All right, so we're coming up to 20 minutes, and I'm trying to run through these as quick as possible. So moving on. Next, we have something like this, and this is like what a lot of people usually try and run out for and get a good axe. But this here is a flat-faced splitting axe. So when I say that, that means that it kind of wedges back and then goes flat, but it's still very thick on the back. So it has a very prominent wedge, and this is meant for splitting. Maybe not massive wood, but this is meant for splitting. Great for having home in the wood pile. They're starting to get pretty heavy, pretty large, and pretty unwieldy for going into the bush with. Not that you can't do it. You're just going to get yourself a little tired as you go along with it, because this probably weighs, 5 times the amount as the little axe I normally take. And like I said, this is great for slamming into some wood and splitting it up. I love this axe for up to like 8-inch blocks of wood. Hammers right through it, no problem. But for running around in the woods, she's a little heavy. Little heavy. But this is, once again, when people go into the big box marts, this is kind of what they end up coming out with. And then when they don't like the axes, it's generally because it's just too big for what you're trying to do. Even if you choke up on this and try to get some finessing into it, the weight of the head doesn't allow you to do fine work easily. Once again, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying you can't do it easily. Is that safe to say, Ben? Did that make sense?
Yeah. In fact, if anyone's really interested in learning a lot about axes, I do recommend the Grants Forest Brooks website. They have a whole bunch of axes on there, and they talk about different models, how to care for them, how to use them. I actually have it up right here now. They have, for example, a shepherd's axe, a Frankziga axe, I'm not sure about that one, log building and carpentry tools, ice picks, miner's axe, which is really interesting, ancient axes, splitting axes, double-bedded axes, and different forest axes. And I know that for bushcrafters, the forest axes are a really big one, and then tomahawk and trade axes. So,
stupid thing. If you want to send me the link to that, I'll include it in the description here. So if anybody wants to take it out or check it out, that'd be more.
I would love to, but this phone does not have you as a contact.
Okay, well, once you, what was the name of it? I'll look it up here.
Grants Forest Brooks.
Grand Forest Brook, B-R-U-K, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Lee Valley actually has a really good selection of those axes, and they're shockingly expensive. But since we got a couple of minutes, I want to hit on a couple of quick things. Maintenance of an axe, because you whined quite a bit about your abused and damaged axe. Maintenance of an axe, especially with a wooden handle or a leather sheath, is extremely important. Keeping them clean, keeping them dry, keeping them properly oiled. These are all extremely important things. And keeping it decently sharp. A blunt axe is much more likely to skid off and go somewhere you don't want it to. It's not going to bite and do what you want. So there's a lot less forgiveness with being abusive to your axe. And the consequences can be quite severe. Anyone who watched some of the early versions of Alone, there was quite a few people sent home on some of those due to accidents with an axe, not putting the cover on when they weren't using it, falling, carrying it. It's a heavy, sharp piece of metal, and it's able to do a lot of damage really quickly. This is why it's such a great tool. It's able to do a lot of damage to tree or whatever you're trying to cut quickly. Can be used for so much. Processing wood, for fire, for carpentry. Also, an axe has been and is used oftentimes for processing larger game.
Mm-hmm. Splitting the breastbone is great for. Splitting the breastbone,
so
breaking the hips.
It's a very versatile tool that allows you to do some heavy work quite quickly and efficiently. And if you're not into axes, it is something to definitely learn a bit about and get used to. It's not for everyone. Some people do not like to have axes because they have an inherent risk of being a heavy piece of metal with a sharp edge that you're swinging around. But that swinging, that effort really can do a lot of good for you really quickly if done correctly.
No,
And that's
running down the maintenance side of things, like you were saying, I guess just some real quick things to cover there because the talking did go quite long. I actually have two other different styles of axes there, but I think we're good where we're at for tonight. If you want to clean off some rust, like if you're getting some rust, it's just surface rust, you can really use some very fine steel wool and a little bit of oil, and you can basically take that straight off. Now, if you're getting deep enough that it's pitting, you may need to soak it in some sort of inhibitor, or you can even use vinegar, and it'll eat some of it out. Just remember to neutralize it afterwards, and then go over it with your steel wool. If there is some white pitting in an axe, and I think one of these has some white pitting in it. Yeah, my axe has a little white pitting in it. See if I can get that up there. So you can see where there's some white pitting in there. Frankly, I just cleaned that, and I don't bother trying to take the pitting out. It really didn't do anything. Funny enough, that axe head I found buried in a field. So that's where the pitting and stuff came from. I cleaned it up and turned it into something I could use. So yeah, you can go over it with some very fine steel wool with a little bit of oil, and it'll clean that away. Then just wipe it down clean. The handle, same kind of deal. You can go over it with some fine wool or some fine sandpaper and take out any splinters and stuff like that. I do recommend against painting them. And this is personal opinion. Everybody has their own. I don't like a painted axe simply because in the winter, if you're wearing gloves and you get that frozen palm effect on your glove, paint tends to not have that great a grip, and I have seen axes go flying. You know what I mean? I do put a small coat of wood oil on mine, like tung oil or something like that, let it soak in, and then kind of go over it with a nice rag and buff out all the extra. That way it seals the handle, but I generally don't paint mine. So, you know, mileage will vary. Different people will tell you different things, but that's my 2 cents on that. What's your feelings on that, Ben, now?
I've seen a lot about it. A lot of people do recommend if it has finished. A lot of them are varnished or painted to remove it in tung oil or linseed oil, something like that. Usually start with a few coats early on, and then maybe go a few weeks, maybe a few months, and then probably once or twice a year after that. If you maintain it, it's going to make a big difference. If you don't and it dries off, that's one of the reasons your heads tend to get loose. And if you get a loose head, it's very dangerous. And then you tend to want to put more wedges in it. In a pinch, if you're in the woods and you got nothing else, you can actually just soak the head of your axe in water, and they'll usually swell up good enough to keep the head on for quite a bit. And my next thing, and this is probably a controversial, but I think the best axes are salvaged axes. So it's worth looking around at. You know, if you have somebody who's been around for a while, older piece of property, chances are there's 4 or 5 axe heads just hanging on a wall or sticking in a rafter or sticking on a stud. Getting a handle, putting an axe like that, choosing a handle that fits you, you can make an axe that really fits your personality. It is something that's really fun, and I get a special kind of satisfaction out of taking one and making some slight modifications to just make it fit me a bit better. And it makes it a very personal axe then. Right? You can file down some edges, you can sharpen up some spots, you can adjust your handle, get an axe that fits and looks like what you want it to. And it can be a fairly personal thing, but a good axe is a joy to use in the woods, and I almost always have at least one axe with some of my gear, so in the back of my bike and back of my vehicle or in my pack when I'm going.
I guess the last comment I have on handles is if you are going to put a handle on an axe, there is kind of a skill set that goes with that on its own. It is as simple as putting the head on the handle, but it's not as simple as putting the head on the handle. You got to make sure it's straight, it's not cantered. You have to make sure there's no twist to it. There is a little bit to that. It's a fun process, but I definitely encourage you to educate yourself a little bit and get some wood rasps and stuff like that. So like 9 times out of 10, when you go to put an axe handle in, the top part's probably going to be too long and too wide, and you have to rasp that down so it fits your axe head, but you have to do it in such a way that when it goes on, that the axe is still straight when you're holding it straight and the head's not twisted off to the side. And it doesn't take much of a twist that when you swing that axe, if it's twisted ever so little, once it hits, it's going to tilt that handle, and that's how you get glancing. And a lot of times when people get injured with axes, you find out that that's what happened. They either recently put a new handle in, or they don't have a lot of experience putting a handle in an axe, and it was just slightly twisted, and it hit and glanced, and it went off and hit into something, or it came back and hit them, or the handle kicked back. There, like I said, there is kind of an art to it, and it's one you can learn. It's totally learnable. Just do a tiny bit of research first. Does that make sense, Ben?
Yeah. Also, if you're putting a handle on, learn to read the grain of an axe handle. If it's wrong, it'll break on you. If it's right, you're gonna get a lot more strength. It's a bit of an art. It's definitely something that's enjoyable. I think for both of us, we are both fans of axes. Obviously,
I have a couple.
but it's not a necessity, but I think it is a worthy tool, especially from a bushcraft point of view. If you want to build structures, if you want to manufacture things in the woods on your own skill, it can hog off a lot of material really quickly. It isn't the most efficient in like saving of wood and all that, but the chips that you lose are still usable for other things. Like if you can scoop them up, they still can burn in the fire. Great for fire starter. It's less of a precision tool, more of a bulk tool, but you can hog off that big task way quicker, oftentimes with an axe. And and that's why I like them. It's just it is a bit of a brute force tool, but if you sharpen and treat them right, they can be used for extremely fine work too.
Absolutely. And I guess one thing I just thought of, add one last thing in, the last hint or suggestion I will give people is when you were splitting, never put anything that's harder than the axe head under it. So if you were splitting a piece of wood, try not to split it directly on the ground, because if it goes through and you hit a rock, you're going to get a chip. So what I like to do is, if I can, take and knock one in half really gently, maybe on a log or something like that, and shave it down to you basically have a plank style, put that down, and then do your splitting on top of that. That way, if you do go through unexpectedly, it's going to hit the wood. It's not going to cause any damage. And that's, again, the number one reason that most axes get damaged. Improper use or improper backing for splitting. They come down, hit the rock. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm going to split this on the rock. I can stop it before it hits. Clunk. We've all been there. We've all learned that lesson the hard way.
My favorite thing is a really good flat top stump. If you can find a good flat top stump, it's not going to shift. It's not going to move. You get your piece on there and you can consistently cut it. That's what I look for. And it really does help. Yeah.
I mean, here at home, I always have a splitting block. When I'm cutting my firewood, I find the biggest piece I can that's solid, no hollow core, cut it flat, cut it to the height I like to split at. There is a height for everybody that you're going to get the maximum amount of force with the least amount of danger. And I think you've mentioned this in the past too, Ben. If you are in a high-risk situation, even going down to your knees, that way there is no chance of it coming down and hitting your shins and stuff like that, that's a good idea too.
Yeah, so when you're swinging an axe, take a thought of where it's going to go and where it could go if it passed through that point. If you have a shorter axe, like I said, it can very well hit the toe of your boot or your shin or your knee. With a long splitting axe or a longer cutting axe, like a full-size axe, it's almost always going to hit the ground before it's able to hit you, which means the likelihood you can hit yourself is pretty low. But think about what you're doing and make sure you're not going to hit your buddy. There are different tricks. We don't have time to get into them, how you can more safely use an axe. But a sturdy wooden surface to hit against is always preferable than, ground, and definitely preferable over a rock. Although you'll see it every time someone's trying to cut a piece of wood and it hit the ground, it's too soft. So they move over to a piece of bedrock, and next thing you know, they have a chipped blade.
Clink.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if anybody is interested in like some of those tips and tricks on how to use an axe, there's kind of an art to that too. Even a long axe, if you're trying to get a power swing, I see a lot of people, they just kind of, like, haha, they pickaxe it, but heads loosen that. There is kind of like an over, around, and two hands together to get the full power stroke to it. And if anybody's interested in that kind of stuff, we can do a video on that or a podcast on that at a later time. You just let us know. Otherwise, I think that's the quick and dirty of different axes, selections, and some things to look for, and some basic maintenance. You got any final thoughts on this, Ben? We're at the 35-minute mark.
No, I'll let it go at that. I could talk for hours. but I won't.
Me too. That's why I got to cut it down. All right, folks. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. And as always, reach out to us if you have suggestions, thoughts, or opinions that differ from ours. We are not experts. We just share our information. Hopefully you guys get something you can pick out of that. And maybe when you guys share with us, I know in the past, we've gotten some good information off you folks too. So definitely reach out to us. You can reach us on all major forms of social media. We're on Facebook. We're on, I see the Twitter symbol still there, but it's not Twitter anymore. It's now X. We're on Instagram. We have our own website, atlanticbushcraft.ca. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Google, YouTube Music, I guess it is now. We're everywhere. Just look for us, and you'll find us. All right, folks. See you next week.
Night all.